Yo friends, so my last video was about this, the Nikon ZF SIlver, and lots of people had things to say because we were talking about the future of the ZF, if there's going to be a Mark II, what we think about the ZF SIlver, why would they put it out now, that kind of thing. So for this video, we're literally just going to go through some of the comments and we're going to talk about what some of y'all have said, and if I agree, if I disagree, what I think is likely to happen, and if Nikon is ever going to see this video, maybe they're going to take some of these to heart. So we'll see. Let's get started. Okay, starting with @CSC Photo, they said, I don't think we're anywhere near a ZF Mark II, but I'll leave my pie in the sky wish list. Add another function button up front. Nice, that'd be good. Add a multi-selector joystick control. I didn't think about that much, but yeah, that would be really, really nice. I'd vibe with that for sure. Tilt screen, like the Z8 or Z9, but also mentions they've been getting along well with the flippy screen and they love that because you can close it, and I totally agree with that. Being able to actually physically close the screen is really nice, and that's something you don't get out of a tilt screen. So that's something we do need to think about. The closest to that would be like the Fuji X Pro 3, where it actually just kind of tilts down so you can see it. That's kind of cool too. I don't know, there's something to be said for that. CF Express Type B and SD cards. I'm not too worried about that. I actually like having the micro SD card. I find that it's totally functional for how I use the camera, and it literally just sits in there almost as if it's internal memory, and I just wipe it when it's full. Unless, you know, I have a wedding day coming up and I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I have enough room on it. That would be the only time I would like wipe it preemptively. Built-in thumb rest for easier handling. This will not mess up the retro look at all. That is cool. I actually like that idea. If it just had like a bigger bump on the back, because it doesn't really have that. If that was built in, the front of it would still look totally normal, but it would be a little bit more comfortable. I like that. And then he says, now stick with me on this one. And then they say, now stick with me on this one. An optional retro vertical grip modeled after the F3 or FM2 motor drive. That would be sick. CSC, I love all you got to say here. I totally agree with pretty much all of it. That would be really cool. Also, they mentioned IBIS lock. I'll happily take a little more bulk to the body, but make some room for IBIS lock. Those mechanisms jiggling around in there while I move, hike, etc. isn't ideal, and damage over time is a concern I have. Fair enough. I've never really thought about that being too big of a concern for me. Having said that, like, I have this camera on like a strap all the time, or like my dual harness, and it just flies around all day. So maybe it is something I should think about. Okay, Kunal 1912 RC said, is the bottom plate metal now? They're just a flip-up screen and a compact weather-sealed 35mm f2 with an aperture ring away from perfection. Yeah, I mean, I think there's more to perfect on this camera than just a flip-up screen, but I'm with you. Flip-up screen, I think overall will be positive, but like I said, being able to close it totally is really nice. So maybe something like that X Pro style would be very, very cool. I would vibe with that in a heartbeat. A 35mm f2 that's weather-sealed with an aperture ring, yes, 100%. I don't love shooting 35mm personally. I would prefer it be a 40mm, but whatever. I think if they remade that 40mm f2 lens with an aperture ring and it was metal like we talked about in the last video, chef's kiss. Now, as for the final question, is this a metal bottom? No, it is not. This is plastic, just like the last one. It is just a silver plastic. So that's too bad. That would have been nice. That would be something they would probably do for a Mark II, not just for a silver edition, I would think. But I agree with you. I think that would be nice. Stephen Thomas 231 said some small metal primes with aperture rings would be awesome. Yes, totally agree. Again, I think if we just run through the lineup from like, let's say like 24mm or 28mm up to 75mm in f2s, that's all we need. I think that would be awesome. Maybe they want to throw in a tiny little like, you know, 135 f3.5 or something like that, like some of those old retro lenses. That would be cool. Let's see here. What else do we got? Okay, here's one I love. This is from Photomaker 4502. If Nikon made a ZF Mark II and allowed for an AI/AIS and non-AI lenses to adapt just like the Nikon DF without using additional lens adapter, I'd buy that camera in a heartbeat. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would be, because it is like a Z mount, being able to adapt that, there would have to be something, because the DF was still that old mount. So you'd need some kind of an adapter, but it would be cool. It's so hard with the flange distance and everything, like you do need an adapter, no matter what. But what I will say about this is that sometimes like those AIS lenses don't always work when you are trying to use the like focus confirmation and stuff. If there's a way to make that happen, that would be awesome. I think the focus confirmation that you get when you're using chipped lenses is so good, and not having to like stack two different adapters on just to make that work would be awesome. So I'm with you in spirit here. I don't know how that would realistically apply. It would have to go back to a DSLR mount, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, cool. I like that. Okay, here's something. This isn't about like what we want to see in a camera in the ZF, but this is sort of like a larger thought on whether or not we're going to see something in the future in terms of a ZF. This is from Gobek Adam. I don't know how Gobek Adam. I also don't think we will see a ZF2 anytime soon. I would expect Nikon to introduce the X-Speed 8 first, most likely with the Z9 II, then that tech would trickle down. Currently, all of their bodies except Z30 and Z7 II have been updated to the X-Speed 7. Of course, ZF2 with updated EVF and screens, maybe with dual card slot, partially stacked sensor for better autofocus, red color profiles, etc. would be lovely, but those are not urgent. I think having more retro style lens options, especially with control ring or better with aperture ring on the lens barrel, would make more sense for the system. 100%, I'm with you. Okay, Stuart Weir said, the only two things I wish this camera had that this doesn't have, and then parentheses, the ZF is my only digital camera. These are the two things: sensor shield like the Z8 and a better thumb grip. External to the camera itself, a weathered sealed 35mm f2.8, that's it. Cool, very, very doable things. I do think for sure we will see a bit of a change to some of the ergonomics. I think that thumb grip is a great idea. Sensor shield, also an awesome idea. I think that'd be great. Now, you know, with the Z8, obviously the sensor shield, like you have an electronic shutter, so there's a sensor shield, but there's no shutter mechanism. So being able to put in a sensor shield as well, I don't know what they have to do internally to make that happen, but I'm with you again in spirit. I think that's a great idea. This is from Kang Ing1. Yeah. Still dreaming of a rangefinder Nikon, and I'm not talking the ZR. The ZF is fine as it is, and it'll be 2 more years before we see a Mark II. You're probably right. I think you're probably right about that. And also, yes, a Nikon rangefinder would be sick. Okay, here's what I think would be sick, because there's one thing to put like a rangefinder that's not really a rangefinder, like a true rangefinder, like you're saying, like an optical rangefinder that actually works with the lenses would be so sick. If it was like basically like the Leica M, you know, lineup, but in Nikon, oh, that would be so dope. I would be all about that. That would be rad. John W3636 says, I honestly don't see Nikon ever going to something other than 24 megapixels for the enthusiast models. We've been wanting 30 to 33 megapixels, but it doesn't seem like we'll get that. Some even speculated that the Z6 III would get a bump up to 33 megapixels. I'm fine with the 24 megapixels in the Z6 III, but I know some really want the higher megapixels. We'll see what actually happens. That's probably a fair take. Like, 24 megapixels is more than enough for 99% of people, myself included. I very rarely need to go above that. Where I do think it's nice having a high resolution camera is being able to utilize the APS-C crop function and have it not take a huge hit to megapixels and still give you like quite a large file. That's what's so great about the Z8 is like when it punches in, it's still a very respectable megapixel size for anything you might need it to do. And it just creates some like cleaner images in that sense, but potentially noisier images when it comes to actual noise. So it's all kind of relative, but you're probably right. We won't see 24 megapixels beyond that for quite a while. Okay, a couple more here. Thomas Chamberlain 2485 says, I see it all centering less around the sensor, which have pretty much plateaued, and more around the new X-Speed 8 processor, which will come with the Z9 II. So it is going to take a long time for that new processor to eventually work its way down to the ZF Mark II. I think they wouldn't dare put it in the ZF before putting it in the Z6 IV, so we were talking a really long time. Z9 II, then Z8 II, then Z6 IV, then Z5 III, then ZF II at the same time around the Z5 Mark III. Interesting take. I agree, like we probably will need to see a new processor, but I don't necessarily think that we're gonna need to see it go into the Z6 IV first. The reason I think that is because obviously like the ZF will be more due for a refresh than the Z6 III. And I think because the Z6 III is like a partially stacked sensor, I don't know, there is something to be said for the fact that they might actually put it in there first because more processing power might make that sensor better. However, I just think with release cycles, they're going to get as much as they can out of the Z6 III because it is such a great camera. Who knows? But good take, good take. Okay, Theory8SF said, be nice if Nikon brought out a Pro Body DX mirrorless camera to replace the Nikon D500. I absolutely agree. I mean, like, we've got the Z50 Mark II, but it's like, it's small, it's compact, but it's like, it's a bit long in the tooth in terms of the sensor, like it's a bit older. It's good. It's good though. It's like it's a fine camera. But if you had like a mirrorless cropped camera, like almost like the Canon R7 that is actually like punches, you know, pretty high and is a pretty great camera. If you had something like that for Nikon, that would be rad. Lots of people just saying we need lenses. Nothing needs to change in terms of imaging technology. Improvements can be made to the body and design, but I would prefer they put their development resources into an FTZ that does everything DSLRs can do, or even reach an agreement with Sigma to sell the contemporary primes on Z mount. Hell yeah. I think if they opened up to Sigma, we would have all of our lens needs made by that opening up. The contemporary lenses are so fun and small and perfect. It'd be great for the ZF. Okay, I'm gonna keep it there because there's so many more awesome comments, but I think the general consensus is like more lenses. We're not gonna see a ZF for a while, and the ergonomics really need to be adjusted. What do you think? Leave some more comments below. Thank you so much for everything on the last video. That was really cool, and we'll talk in the next one. Cool, peace.